second round of preparation on the body cam discussion and the commission's consideration of a future position on this topic. And so for all the work that we know has been done in the background and the follow-up that we requested from the last meeting in advance, we thank you. And who is going to take charge of this? Is this you, Chief?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chief Garcia.
Good morning, sir. Just briefly, thank you all again for having us back. We brought a couple different components to the overall consideration. Today we have a couple of gentlemen from some other agencies that will tell you about their experience in implementing the body cam system at their agency, as well as our public safety IT gentleman, Mr. Robert Steele. He'll be giving you some insight on where we're at as far as our CAD and RMS and how body-worn system would implement in with that, as well as our in-car video system. And of course, the big consideration, the storage of all of that different data. But to get into the program, I'll offer you Assistant Chief Lehman that has done quite a bit of background on this, and have him introduce our guests here today. So thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Just kind of the agenda for today. We're going to give you some feedback from other agencies, like Chief said. Robert Steele is going to talk about a few implementation options, kind of tell you which way we can go, phased in approaches, different things like that. And then naturally, any questions you guys may continue to have, we can answer those or do more research on those. Next slide, Robert. Or yeah, there. Two people I want to introduce to you first, and Chief Odell and Lieutenant Kolak, are you able to turn your cameras on? They introduce those. Chief Odell is from Kissimmee Police Department, and he retired from Orlando PD and now has been chief at Kissimmee for several years, and was the chief when they started body cam implementation, and they're up to year 4 or 5 and looking at re-upping that or going to another vendor. So he was going to talk a little bit about that and some of the feedback they have. And then Lieutenant Kolak is from Cape Coral Police Department, and he's been in the traffic and DUI enforcement training for years, like I have. And they're unique like us, comparable size agency. Their in-car system is different than their body cam system. So they have two systems that they're marrying together, and he'll talk a little bit about, those issues there when they happen. And that's kind of where we're at. Talk about some of the impacts that they've had and implementation timeline. Once we're given the go ahead, if that's what's decided, how long it'll take, and then some of the challenges they've had. We felt it was important for you guys to hear those from those kind of agencies. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Odell.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about our program. I'm a huge proponent of the body cam program, and I'll kind of go over that as I go through some of my comments. We began our program in 2017, and we were in a great position from the standpoint of we didn't really have any public outcry or requests from our community. We don't get a lot of community-generated complaints on our officers as it is. So we could really take our time. The focus in our area of Central Florida was on the Orlando Police Department and Orange County Sheriff's Office. And by virtue of me spending my first career with the Orlando Police Department, I had access as they evaluated the program and tried it in different units. So I had a lot of testimonials from their officers and the impact on them, as well as from the agency. So I could really take our time into determining what system we would go with, and then also spend that time educating our officers and staff on what to expect. So we signed the contract with Utility in February of 2017, and we actually started getting our equipment in. Ours was a little different. It actually mounts in the uniform, so there's a mount attached to the front of our uniform shirt. And so we had to get, new uniform shirts for everybody, and then work with the company to get that equipment in. And then obviously the training. So it wasn't until late August early September of that same year that we actually started rolling the product out on the street on our officers. And then another couple of months after that. So really a full year. You've got to get the officers used to when to turn it on and kind of making that part of their daily routine. We felt with our system and most systems today, there's opportunities where the agency can set up to have the body camera come on automatically in certain situations. So anything from drawing your weapon or taser, turning on your blue lights, getting in and out of the car. And we did those to really take some of the thinking out of the officers. Obviously, when they're going to a critical call or a critical incident, we would prefer them concentrating on keeping everyone and themselves safe versus worrying if their body camera's on or not. So that really is an agency decision as you work through the program. Because I had the feedback and the testimonial from officers on the street from Orlando, it really was a smooth transition and very accepting from the members of our agency. The reality of the situation is I believe the body camera improves behavior on both sides of the equation, not only our officers and their professionalism, but members of the public when they know that they're on camera. It proves out more times than not. It demonstrates that our officers were professional or within policy in most of their or all of their community interactions. So, if it is a negative circumstance, we do get complaints from people that whether it's how they remember the situation or they're exaggerating the officer's behavior, we have the body camera to, show exactly what happened, and we're able to quash a number of complaints that way. So again, with ours, it was more, we wanted to stay ahead of, what we felt was becoming a trend in law enforcement and an expectation of communities in that law enforcement does have body cameras. We initially put it on our first responders in the sense of patrol, traffic, our street crimes unit, the units that are really out there in the public, touching the community on a daily basis. I will let you know that we're expanding our program to include our SROs beginning in the next school year. So we will add to the program there. So we didn't have a lot of pushback from our officers, and that aspect went well. I think it aids obviously in the transparency of your agency and kind of being that open book for the public. And it also serves us well in a lot of positive interactions. So we can use our social media platform as well as our local news media, pick it up from time to time. But we, can show some wonderful activities of our officer and, positive interactions with our community. So it's a great marketing tool for the agency. Some of the things that, the growing pains with it, it is a huge demand increase on your public records request. Everybody wants to see what's on the camera now. I would recommend working, if you haven't already, bring in your state attorney's office. As we experience in law enforcement, as they get a case, they look down the list and basically, either subpoena or it's a tasking sheet for us. They want every body camera. And so we've worked with the state attorney's office. They have the ability, we can through a link, allow them to view all the body cam footage for any particular incident. So a case that they have, and it gives them a time frame to look it up. So they can then review and then only task us for videos that matter for the prosecution of their case. So that has helped us along the way. But I will tell you that once if you implement the program and the community and the news becomes aware of it, your public records request for those videos will increase significantly. Obviously, you have redaction issues with that, and that takes time. I don't think there's a perfect system out there or a very, overly fast system. So I would expect an increase in staffing in your records or whoever would handle that public records request. And the last really only negative is the cost and the cost for storage. So I believe looking at yours, you have the storage capability within your own IT system. We did not. So part of our, it cost us $1,100 and change per unit every year for storage. We started with utility back in 2017. I kind of, at least we felt that was the best product out there. They were a software company that got into the body cam business. So we felt their software capabilities were ahead of everybody else. I will tell you today that we are looking strongly at switching as our contract expires to Axon. Those of us in law enforcement, Axon puts a huge amount of resources into their production and development area of their company. And so, at least my opinion, for what it's worth, they have changed the game as far as body cameras. The only last real implementation issue that we came up with was, again, the officers getting used to making that a part of their routine when it's not a critical call. When they're going to let's say an armed robbery in progress, we have systems in place, but when they just get out in some type of community contact, we had to work on getting them in the routine. What we did was not necessarily for discipline, unless it became the normal behavior of them not turning it on, but we had our supervisors and our lieutenants in patrol do those spot checks just randomly and check them throughout the day to make sure that they were turning on the body camera. And I don't believe there was any formal discipline related to that. Generally, we talk to the officer, reinforce our training, and then we did not have any issues going forward. That's really it, kind of a general overview for ours in a nutshell. And I don't know if you're allowing for any questions of me or however you want to work that going forward. Yes, sir. I believe you're on mute, sir.
I apologize, Chief. Thank you very much. That is really wonderfully concise and valuable information. I have a couple of questions, and I'll work backwards. Incidents that you'd allow for the cameras to be off. Tell us what some of those might be, where in the spot checks you wouldn't disagree with the officer's decision.
It was, obviously if they're on a break, and whether it's restroom or at dinner, but we decided, and it's worked out for us, that anytime they get out with the public, we want their body cameras on. So, and part of, I think, selling that with our troops was that we highlighted positive interaction. If they took a few minutes to help a kid, fix the chain on their bike or shoot a basketball or just have a great conversation, we highlighted those things. So we reinforced that, we're also looking for the great things that you do every day.
Yeah, so that's good. And is that postable? That's the next question. Is that postable on social media, that event? Do you go back and talk to that citizen, or is it that they're aware and that you can post whatever they may want to highlight?
I'd say generally, kids are the only ones we either make sure we edit it to not show their face, or we do ask permission from their parents. The general public, when we're out, if it's more of a private interaction, then we certainly would ask them about it. But if it's, somebody out washing their car in the front yard and our officer gets out and helps them, we generally will just post that.
Okay, great. The automatic features, you are pleased with anytime you can have automatic features that are duress, be engaged. I mean, that's part of what you would advocate.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And then we also, and I would imagine it's probably norm now, I just don't know the answer to that, but ours allowed us. So if we had an area of town where we had a number of complaints on our officers or anything of that nature, we can do a geofence around that area at any time an officer drives through or enters that area of the geofence, their body camera comes on. So there's a number of ways, I'm by no means an IT person, but I'm amazed with the technology and the things that they can do.
That's a very practical application. You're doing the SROs now, and if you were doing this and kicking off new, and let's imagine you're doing an Axon system and you're starting today, would you do phasing or would you do a complete installation on the force, given what you know now?
It would honestly come down to dollars. So when we initially did our program, we used federal forfeiture monies. to start the program, and then the city picked up the budget going forward. If I had the money, I would implement it one time across the board. Yes, sir.
Excellent. And the last question I have is on the state attorney's office and shifting some of that responsibility there on public records. Did I understand you to say that first thing you do on public records requests is to have it run through the state attorney's office and then it would be populated to the department?
I'm sorry. It was, so it was public records request, and I kind of lumped them in with tasking requests from the state attorney's office. So the public, mostly the news, but the public wants to see what's on the videos. And then the state attorney, when they get a case presented to them, they would just go down and arbitrarily send us a tasking sheet for all the body camera. And well, we may have 10 officers show up to a scene, and that's 10, body cameras that we have to review, redact, and so now we've given them an opportunity to view what's available and then only ask us for what they need for prosecution.
Thank you. That was very helpful, Chief Odell.
Yes, sir.
Mayor, could I get Lieutenant Kolak to talk about Cape Coral real quick, and then because he may spur some other questions as well. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. We started using the camera systems and started actually doing test and evaluations back in 2013. We then went fully implemented in 2015. So there was approximately a year and a few months that we actually had where we were testing, evaluating, getting everything in order before we actually implemented the systems. Once we did, it was across the board. All uniformed officers from the rank of sergeant below wear a camera system. So our canine units, traffic units, even our school resource officers, we have now, I believe, 30 school resource officers that also wear cameras. We are pretty much the same as the chief said. Every incident that involves a citizen, the cameras do go on and there is a actual recording. Certain camera systems, of course, allow for a mute function. There are some standards that we allow officers to mute the audio, but the recording, the video would still stay on. It has decreased significantly our internal affairs investigations due to the fact that it is captured on video, these incidents, and explains pretty much the reality of what happened for the most part. And a lot of those can actually be stopped even at the first line supervisor level, such as the sergeant can review a camera from a professional conduct standpoint of an individual on a traffic stop complaining that something was said or done, and they're able to stop that. As far as the camera systems, in like the chief was saying with redaction and requests, we did see a very huge spike in the very beginning for requests of video. It has since gone down significantly because, again, once it's out there, it just takes a little while for people to get used to it and realize there's video, and they stop asking. Our way that we do it at our agency is we actually have our public affairs officer and records involved with any type of requests, because when the media does request it, of course, we want it to go through our public affairs office to make sure that they're aware, and they can also go through it to make sure that it abides by the state statute of what can and cannot be released. They do the same, as the chief said. They put a lot of videos out on social media of good interactions, and then even things that the citizens may want to be aware of, such as if an officer goes to an area and it's during mating season with alligators, they'll put out videos from body-worn cameras of officers capturing alligators. So there's a lot of great benefits with it. One of the biggest benefits that we found is also training. Due to the fact that all of these incidents are captured on body-worn camera, the training unit goes back and they can actually review incidents to determine if there's a need for certain things with the officers, such as handcuffing or even de-escalation techniques need to be actually focused on a little bit more. So that was a great aspect of the cameras that we actually weren't even aware of that was going to affect us, which it did in a positive note. The major kind of complications we had in the very beginning, of course, was the buy-in from the officers. The officers, we've had in-car systems since 1998. Going to body-worn cameras, the officers were, of course, very hesitant and anxious that Big Brother was always going to be watching and that type of thing. So getting the buy-in from the officers was a little difficult in the very beginning. At this point in time, with having the cameras now for 6 years, there's officers that actually will not go out in the field if their camera is broken because they want that camera. They want to have it on video because they know they're doing the right thing and they want to make sure that it's captured. So that was one thing that it was a quick turn, and officers that were very hesitant are now wanting the camera system. The one thing I will say is we have, like Deputy Chief or the Assistant Chief said, is we have a different in-car system. That has caused many issues. The in-car system is based on a internal server, and our body-worn cameras are based on a cloud server. Different vendors. Unfortunately, when someone does a public records request or we need to send something to the state attorney's office, that is a huge issue because you're now going to 2 different locations to actually get all of that data to send it over. The ones that are on the internal server has to be put onto a DVD and then shipped over either via mail or by a courier, whereas the cloud server, we just send it via an email and they have access to it. So that was the only major issue or current major issue that we have now. As far as the school resource officers, they love the cameras. The kids love the cameras. We've captured a lot of them, out in the courtyards dancing and things like that. And the public loves the actual cameras. We were in the same boat as the chief was, where we did not have the actual community demanding we have cameras. This was more of a, let's get in front of the actual, the cart, make sure that we can get the cameras out there, and let people know that we're a very transparent agency. And once we did that, people fell in love with it even more. So again, it's a great thing for not only the officers themselves, but also the community, because it's protecting both. Yes, sir.
Well, that's pretty fabulous. So you would not hesitate to do it all over again?
Oh, definitely not. We love the camera systems, and as I said, even the officers at this point, they love having the actual video to back them up. So if a citizen, and unfortunately, as you know, in today's day and age, there's going to be a complaint about something, and the officer is able to say, I did everything correctly, and a supervisor can look and show it immediately.
You talked about officer muting being allowed. What are some circumstances that would be okay?
A very big thing with is, of course, get with your state attorney's office. Our state attorney actually is the one that requested that we to mute video under certain circumstances, which are if you are on a call for service and the officers are just waiting for a detective to show up or something like that. Well, they're going to have a conversation, usually of a personal nature, because they're not going to sit there and talk about the actual incident for a half hour, 45 minutes. So they are allowed to mute their camera, but we have it in our policy. What they have to do is they actually have to say why they're muting the camera and the date and time they're muting it. And then when they go back to unmute the camera, they have to say that they're back on again. So there's a reason for it. They can't just mute because they want to. There has to be a reason.
And then the last question I have is, you had mentioned that if the camera is broken, I may not want to go out without it. Would there be situations where you don't have enough cameras and they are broken and they still need to go out? And how would you decide that?
Well, like the chief was saying, we actually use Axon, and due to the fact of the Axon cameras, we have them docked here at the police department. So an officer could technically grab a off-duty officer's camera that was charged on the opposite shift. He could use that camera, and then those videos could be actually transferred to the officer that wore the camera for that night. So we do not have officers that go out without a camera. Even if we don't have a spare, they can grab one.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Commissioner Walker, Mayor, are we taking questions now? Okay, Commissioner Walker, I know you've had your hand up before me. I'll defer to you. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, Commissioner McLeod. I'm certainly glad to hear from both particular municipalities as they went to implement the BWC body-worn cameras or in-car system as we already have, utilizing both of those technologies to support I guess we call the greater good of what we want to make sure the public understands about law enforcement and our police officers and their duties, and even their actions that they perform during the course of their particular day. But my question is kind of unique in respect of your particular municipalities as to where, because you all were not maybe encouraged by your local community to go into the route of the BWC, where I think we are being encouraged by a community group or groups to move toward that direction. Particularly so, I wanted to ask, what's your demographic breakdown, as far as, ethnicity is concerned, both Kissimmee, both Cape Coral. I could Google it right quick, but I was doing some other things here personally. I could not get to my my phone here, but could you tell me about that a little bit, please? I think that particularly so because what I see across our country, and I think a lot of this direction is coming from, is as we see those that are kind of pushing at this particular BWC kind of situation. Even though I agree with how your positive movement has been, and certainly would think that's a good thing to do, as you all just said, to make sure our law enforcement personnel are doing what they need to do and doing it in a professional manner. But if you could tell me that kind of information right now, I greatly appreciate it. Either one of you, a captain, or lieutenant, or a chief.
Yes, sir. Our demographics we're a little over 60% Hispanic, 11% African American, and the remainder white. Our agency demographics are extremely close to that, so we're actually over in our African American officers. We are the majority of our officers are Hispanic, not quite 60%. We're closer to the 40%, but still as close as I think any of our brother or sister agencies in the state of Florida. And so those are our demographics.
And so the city of Cape Coral, we're approximately 70% Caucasian white, right around 17% African American, and I think 4 or 5% Hispanic. We do have a agency nearby, Fort Myers, where they have a larger ethnic group comparison. They also have cameras, and they were kind of in the boat like you're explaining, to where it was somewhat demanded by the citizens that for them to get camera systems.
Thank you for those statistics, because I think it's warranted. But again, I think it's very positive to hear from both both your viewpoints, where it become a good thing to have and to be a part of, because you want to make sure the public knows the good is here, and not having all the, I guess you want to hear about, hey, what may not be happening or what may not be known. And by getting, of course, involved with BWC, the body-worn cameras, you're going to find some stuff that maybe we don't know about, and for lack of a better word. But I'm encouraged to hear the positive movement both your cities have had, and also to make sure that the professional part of the law enforcement officer, he or himself or herself, performing their duties as they should be. And that's what we want, and that's what we want to have our community know as well. I'm encouraged by even what our chief has said, even coming into this discussion, how we here in our particular community, we're not having a lot of, I guess, the most of the challenges you may have heard about in the latter months across our country. And certainly for those that may have a problem or concern, they have a way to make sure they register a complaint and get it through the system, hopefully to be able to hear about it. But I do believe the positive movement here of having the BWCs coming about will help bring about what we need, I think, for here in our community as well. Thank you.
Sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you both for being here today, taking time out of your schedules. It really means a lot to us to have you join us and share your perspective. I have two questions. First, for you, Chief O'Dell, and then the second one for both of you. And Chief, would you say your experience with your officers was similar to what was described at Cape Coral? Initially, was there some skepticism or hesitancy, and then over time that has changed, and your officers are champions as well and advocates of having body-worn cameras? And then the second would be, if you were going back and doing this, starting a program, implementing body-worn cameras today, is there anything that you would do differently or that you would recommend, hey, we did this and we would say do it a different way?
So the answer to your first question, we again had the ability, so we really talked about it and got the feedback from Orlando Police Department in Orange County probably a year before we pulled the trigger on entering into a contract. So we had the opportunity to have a lot of discussions. So initially, yes, it was, we're looking at body cameras and what does that mean? But then as we can continue the communications, and I could provide those testimonials from, officers with the Orlando Police Department, many of whom our officers know. And then of course they were talking to them. By the time we rolled it out, we really didn't have any major concern. I mean, I'd be naive to say that nobody was, against it, but the majority of our department was very receptive, and I felt like we had a smooth transition. I don't know that there's anything I would have changed with regard to, other than I would have found the money, figured out the money somehow to implement the program for the entire agency at one time, and potentially talked more with our IT, even though I don't have that acumen, to try to get our own our capability to do our own storage, because it is extremely expensive to go outside.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Chad, did you want Lieutenant Collect to respond to?
Sure, Lieutenant. I'd be curious if there's as well. Is there anything that you all would have done differently, or if you're advising a department today from your experience?
The only thing that we pretty much would definitely have done differently is the integration of the in-car and the body-worn camera being from the same vendor. That was our biggest issue that we still contend with, unfortunately, today until our contract runs up. Otherwise, again, we've just been positive throughout the actual course that we've had. We've extended our contract with Axon. We like that's who we're using. Again, there's plenty of those that are out there that are great companies, but we're very, very happy with everything that we've had with the body-worn camera. And it is actually, I can say it's saved some careers of some officers due to the fact that it was on body-worn camera, where accusations came up that could have been very detrimental, if not criminal in nature, that were found and proven incorrect and unfounded based on the camera footage.
Thank you, Lieutenant. That's very helpful. And I just wanted to make a comment about I appreciate you sharing about the positive experiences that are captured on video. My colleagues know that my dad was in law enforcement and police chief in Auburndale up until 2012. And I often say that there's so many things that our police officers do that are positive and great for the community that no one ever sees. And you only can capture a handful of those, even with phones and social media. So the chance to magnify that and be able to share more of that with the community, I hadn't really considered that to the level that I'm hearing from you all. So thank you for sharing that.
Yes, sir.
With the music, you can't see him, but he has his hand up and his head.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm having some technical difficulties here. Yeah, thank you very much. And I'd like to echo what Commissioner McLeod just said about the positive aspect. Those are things that I've not spent a whole lot of time thinking about. So I appreciate you opening my eyes to that. When I think of body cameras as I'm learning and educating and talking to individuals about that, really I've come across there's three participants in each one of the videos, at least that I can come to right now. One would be the officer wearing it. The second would be the people or person that are interacting with the camera. And the third would be the bystander who just happens to be around there. And that's really kind of where my concern lies, would be the third party that just happens to be in the area. And now they have been videoed doing, just their normal day-to-day activities. And now that video is being stored. It's being sent somewhere and can also be requested if an issue comes up. Can you maybe just put me at ease, or give me just some education on what can happen to us as civilians as we're just out and about while video is being shot? Thank you.
And that, we don't, that concern has not necessarily been brought up with us. And generally, if people are in a public location, then, there's, we have the ability to video. And so that honestly, it really hasn't come up. If it's a more private situation, we obviously have the opportunity to redact that, blur their face, and protect their identity. I don't know if Coral Gables has come across that, but I apologize. I just haven't had any, there hasn't been any complaints from that nature. And generally, if there's a situation with police, certainly some people want to get close and watch, but I think the majority, or anybody that wants to leave or is concerned with that, could certainly walk away.
Yeah, and I think that the blurring or redacting certainly helps me with that. Again, as I'm educating myself on these, that was kind of my question. If somebody is kind of a third party and it's being shot, what is their option for retaining their privacy? And I guess blurring or redacting would certainly help with that. Thank you.
Could you help me, thank you again, Mr. Mayor. Could you help me here again, both of you, I guess you gave an answer about, of course, the information being shared with the State Attorney's Office, and I guess the utilization of some particular mechanism, technology-wise, to be able to have that information disseminated or given to them, and in cost kind of situations that may come about, to make sure that they have the information they needed for a particular case as we move forward.
Yeah, for our particular system, it was we gave them the training. We provide them with a link, so the link will come with the case that they're assigned, and it's a finite number of days that it's available for them to review. But there was no additional cost associated with ours. It was just us allowing them to have that link.
And with us, the Axon system, basically, it's somewhat the same. Evidence.com is the actual cloud server for that device. The state attorney's office actually has their own login and their own actual separate entity for evidence.com that's free of charge, because they're not actually storing any of the information. Therefore, they're able to log in any cases that we shared with them would be, of course, in the cloud. They're able to get that and watch any of the videos that we shared with them at any point in time. Unfortunately, the in-cars, as I explained, is different. Those would be placed on a DVD and shipped over either via mail or a courier.
And those become their evidence and can be stored on their servers after that point as well, correct?
The DVDs, yes, sir. The actual evidence.com, the Axon, the body-worn cameras, that is stored by the actual agency, so us, the Cape Coral Police Department, and then they are able to download it if they want. They're able to watch it, do whatever they would like to the video, but it's at no cost to them.
Commissioner Madden.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you both so much for this presentation. I agree with my colleagues. I really am, a little surprised about all of the positive interaction that is captured and that can be used in a beneficial way. So I had two questions. One of them is, it sounded like in the presentation you were, I was inferring that we would be not having, that our in-car videos are not stored on an internal server. Are we already, so number one is, are we already storing our in-car on the cloud, so we would not have the extra costs that they're associating with their project. And then secondly, from the gentleman in the other areas, did you have any difficulty? Some of the things that we hear here as an obstacle is that if it's not statewide, or if it's not, if our county, which intermingles so much with our LPD, does not have body cameras, is that problematic? I mean, certainly people live in Lakeland zip codes who are in the county and have the sheriff's officer. So we have a lot of interaction between the two agencies. Is that difficult when one agency has the cameras and one doesn't? So those are my two questions.
For me, I would think it's more difficult. We were the first ones to implement the program in our county. I would think that may be difficult for the agencies that don't have it. I think, at least my perception is, this has become an expectation for most of our communities. So from our standpoint, it was not an issue. I would have to believe it was more of an issue from the agencies that did not have it. They do both have them now.
In our agency, we were the first in our area. Also, the sheriff's office still currently does not have cameras. I don't want to say there's issues, but yes, there has been complaints from citizens about why the sheriff's office doesn't have cameras when there's two major municipalities within that county that do have cameras.
And Chief, could you speak to that?
I'm sorry.
You had another part to that question, I thought. Can you restate that, please?
You want me to address that, please?
It was the storage question. If Lakeland PD has, if we already store on the cloud.
So currently our in-car video system stores to a server on premise, and it backs up to CD, and we export out to CDs like the other agencies have discussed. However, we are currently in the process of transitioning to cloud storage for the in-car video system, and there's a PMF that's in process right now for October 1 to start the transition. We just received our latest batch of vehicles with the new version of the in-car video system that supports that new server and the cloud storage. So we've been working on this for about a year, and this is the first batch that are going to be starting to migrate that to cloud. So we're kind of in a hybrid situation, and as we replace out those in-car video systems, that's they're going to be stored to the cloud. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's great. Thanks so much.
And while you're on that topic, Robert, if you wouldn't mind, let's talk about how you would see that integration taking place. Assume you would do an Axon system just for purposes of conversation and the cars and the obstacles to overcome.
Okay, if you would like to, we can go ahead and move forward with the presentation. There are a handful of slides that kind of cover the different options, and then we can go over the questions at the end, if that works for everybody. Okay, and go ahead and share my screen again. Okay, so can everybody see? We're good? Okay, so first let's talk about a little bit about digital evidence management in general. There are many components of a digital evidence management system that we've had. We have history with digital evidence in the city, and for the last couple of years we've been working to plan, working on the planning and the process for combining all those and consolidating all of those into one systems like the other agencies have discussed. So first of all, we've got the in-car video system. The body-worn camera, which would be a new component of digital evidence management. We have interview room videos where when detectives bring victims or suspects back to the police department and perform interviews, those are recorded. We have crime scene photos that are gathered by our crime scene department. We have other photos and videos which are received from like convenience store, security camera systems, citizens, home security systems, any type of photos, cell phone photos, or anything else that we receive from someone else. Right now, pretty much all of those are located in different disparate systems, and we're working to consolidate all that into one digital evidence management system. And then finally, the importance of integrating that with CAD and RMS system, so it automatically identifies and tags all of those digital evidence components with the cases and incidents they're related to. So that kind of ties everything together. Does anybody have any questions on that slide? Okay. Just kind of give you an idea for where we're at right now in current projects and both the digital evidence management and other areas. So we just recently deployed the new digital evidence management server, which I discussed. This is supporting the next generation of in-car videos that we just restarted. We just started receiving this year. So that server is up. It's on our infrastructure at our data centers, and it is. We're in the process right now working with the police department to connect the new patrol vehicles that we received to that server. We've upgraded the interview room system. That system is tied to the in-car video system, and we've recently purchased the new hardware for that. It's being shipped, and as soon as that comes in, we'll be implementing those new digital cameras and tying that into that new server. We've purchased some local storage to expand that. That is to get us through to start handling all these devices. They come in until we start activating the cloud storage, and we'll be using that cloud storage for archiving. We're going to be saving 30 days or 60 days worth of digital evidence on premise before we move it to the cloud, just because a lot of what you receive is non-evidentiary and can be purged after 30 days. So that kind of helps keep our costs down. So we're not paying as much on cloud storage. The other things we're working on right now for IT public safety specifically, we have the CAD and RMS implementation. That is a very large project. We're working on that right now. It's an 18-month project, and estimated completion for that is about this time next year, a little bit earlier in the spring of next year. Next year, we also have patrol laptop refresh. That's about 250 laptops that we're going to be replacing. The existing laptops we have out in the field are end of life into support. So we will be working with patrol officers and detectives and everybody to issue them replacement devices. In FY23, we have the Emergency 911 Communications Center renovations project. That's new furniture, new network cabling, new workstations, new computers, just a major renovation of the 911 center coming in FY23. And also in 23, we have our FDLE CGIS technical audit. That takes a few months. We work with FDLE to go through the FBI security requirements and make sure that we're meeting all of their technical specifications. And then FY25, to give you an idea of just kind of our strategic planning, that's when we're looking to deploy mobile devices for patrol officers. That would be like a companion device, like a tablet or an iPhone or something like that, to get the data from the CAD and RMS system to that. It also would allow them to do things like capture digital evidence on their agency issued phone and upload it directly to the digital evidence management system. So it kind of would work in conjunction with like a body camera and in-car video. So does anybody have any questions on those? Okay. Last time we met, there was a request to kind of give some direction on different options moving forward. And looking at it from a project management perspective, planning, these would be the 4 options in general that we came up with. And these are all flexible and adjustable, but these kind of give you a good estimate or ballpark of what each one would look like. The existing project scope, that is what we're doing right now, just to give you an idea of a baseline. So we're upgrading our in-car video through attrition. I believe we have around 160 in-car video systems, and every year we replace approximately 20 to 25 of those through the purchase of new vehicles. The in-car video systems are about $6,000 a piece, and they last the length of the vehicle. So we normally try and do the refresh of the in-car video equipment at the same time as the vehicle to get full return on investment on those in-car video systems. And we're not putting brand new and doing a lot of work to put new equipment in old vehicles that are about to be retired. So, and I said with our existing plan as well, we're phasing in cloud storage beginning next year. A phased approach. This is, I'm sorry, the existing one, that does not include anything with body cameras. So as you see existing through the rest of this presentation, just keep in mind that's what we're doing right now with no body cameras. These other three solutions all include body cameras. A phased approach would be that we continue replacing our in-car video systems through attrition. So when the cars are due for replacement, we would go ahead and replace them at our current schedule. I did make that a little bit more aggressive. So we are kind of in the next couple of years replacing all in-car video. And then after that last in-car video is up to the latest model that fully supports body camera integration, then we would add in the body cameras. That also includes, again, phasing in cloud storage as that throughout that process. The hybrid is a little bit different. What the hybrid does is it kind of puts the body cameras ahead of the in-car video replacement. So we would go ahead and purchase new body cameras and purchase cloud storage with those body cameras when we received them. And then we would continue to upgrade the existing in-car video through attrition. So there would be a little bit of a growing pain during that transition, but within the next few years, we would get to the same spot. And then finally, the final option would be just to go out and purchase all new in-car video, all new body camera system. And even though the thing with the all new is, even though it was all new, it would take some time to take out all of the in-car video systems we have and replace all of those kind of proactively. You know, we just received some in-car video systems last year that are only a year old. So that you know, it would be taking out, I would say, preemptively replacing that equipment. Does anybody have any questions on this slide?
About how many of those would that be?
Right now, I believe it's around 140. We just purchased 20 that are in different stages of being received. I think we have about 4 or 5 that are due this month, and then I don't know where the other 15 or so are. I would say in the next couple months.
Are those inbound 20 able to be integrated into the new combined system? Okay, so 140 that wouldn't be part of the system today that would have to be replaced.
They would be with the current vendor. The pricing that and all of these different scenarios can be with our existing vendor or other vendor, and depending on if we decide to stick with our existing vendor or with another vendor, the challenges vary depending on that. Each different thing we've looked at has different pros and cons. So
I'm not trying to undermine your existing contract, Commissioner McCarley.
Yeah.
I think that answered my questions. The life of, and you may have said this earlier, so I apologize, but the life of the existing in-car video is the same as the car, correct? So however long we have the car, we have that.
Yeah, so the in-car video systems normally have a lifespan around 5 years. We keep our cars a little bit longer than that, and normally, we have warranty on those devices for 5 years. So the last couple of years of a vehicle, if we have issues with it, we'll either decide to go ahead and just repair it or potentially swap it out with another spare unit. So we just kind of stretch the life on those a little bit because we really don't like putting brand new equipment in an old vehicle. It's not very efficient. So we have to stretch the in-car video a little bit to make it last the length of the vehicle, if that makes sense.
Thanks.
Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for having to get this thing turned over to be able to talk. Could you explain to me again the hybrid scenario? Because I know that was shared with us in maybe the former conversation.
Okay.
The initial conversation about body cameras, and I was looking at that even more so at this point. So could you give me some more explanation on that? And do we have the cost yet?
Yes,
Or-
those are coming. I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide because I think that might answer your question. And
Okay.
this next slide is going to cover the timeline of these. So this, I broke this down into two colors. The blue is body camera and the red is in-car video. So if you look at our existing, through attrition, all of our in-car video systems would be on the latest version by 9/30 of 2025. That's a few years out, a few fiscal years out. The phased approach, which is like I said, we're pretty much trying to be more aggressive on the replacement of in-car video, and we would replace all the in-car video of March of 2024. And then after we replaced all of that, then we would be adding in the body cameras at the end of that. The hybrid approach is we go ahead and we be more aggressive on the body cameras, and we go ahead and get the body cameras earlier and have them in place, live and functioning by March of 2023. But instead of being very aggressive on replacing in-car video that still has useful life on it, we go ahead and use that up. And then by 9/30 of 2025, everything will be current, and it's kind of just a growing pain. It kind of works itself out. So we get the full advantage of our investment, full return on investment, and we get to a system where we're on both the in-car video and body cameras at the same time. Does that answer your question, the difference between the two of them? Okay. And the last one
Yes.
is all new. The all new one, like I said, the body cameras are a little bit later here, and the reason why is because if we go all new, we would have to go into all the vehicles and take out all of the in-car video equipment and put in the in-car video equipment and add body cameras at the same time. So the deployment of body cameras is actually less work than the in-car video, because you don't have to do all the wiring and harnesses and antennas and power. You know, it's a camera and a docking station. There's some technology and some stuff we have to do behind the scenes, but that's why on all new, the actual deployment of body cameras will be later, is because you're having to do both those things at the same time. Yes.
So if you are looking at this, and really I'm asking you this from your personal preference, and you saw that you could go earlier with body cams full deployment by 3 of 23, and sustain in the hybrid model and sustain this transfer through 2025, do you feel like we compromise the in-car systems in some way, or does that seem the most economically prudent to kind of weigh in on what I'm wanting you only to compare between, in my question, between hybrid and new.
Okay, so between hybrid and new, the big things I would say about that is hybrid, there is a slight operational impact, and I use the word slight. That would be more for the chiefs to comment to. The only downside to that I see is during that transition period, we do have to have docking stations at the police department, and the officers would have to come in and dock the cameras at the briefing room and charge them overnight. So there's operational impact of the hybrid versus the new. They have everything in their cars. They can dock them. It's there. But the challenge with the new is to take all of that equipment and to put it into all the vehicles and to transition all that out. It's being very aggressive on the work. I think it has a bigger impact on the organization to take vehicles out of service and be that aggressive on it. I think it would be a better transition for the department to kind of, like I said, kind of phase in the in-car video. They're very comfortable with the in-car video it is right now. So it kind of keeps us on the regular refresh of that, with fleet, and it kind of, I think that's smoother. I don't know that, and again, to answer your question, the hybrid is definitely more cost-effective, fiscally responsible solution than the all-new.
Deploys the body camera sooner, 6 months sooner.
Yes. So I've got some more information on here. The next slide is pricing. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted to make sure before you change slides.
Am I okay, Chair? Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So question then, with the hybrid approach, why are we seeing such a long time then for the in-car, for the ICS to come about? And I'm trying to understand, because if I hear it being more of a practical approach, economical approach versus all new, both BWC and ICS, why such a long time for that? It's like 2 years afterwards.
For the in-car video, it's because we do that when the cars are upfitted. So when the vehicles come in and the cages are put in and all of the equipment's put in the vehicle, they run all the cabling at that time, and for ease of installation and also just to get that as part of the configure and build of that. Now we can be more aggressive on that, and we can purchase and swap out the equipment sooner. It would just be taking vehicles that are currently in service, taking them out to an upfitter, and a lot of times they have to remove the cage or remove the headliner and take things out to run new cables, because a lot of times the in-car systems, as you move them around, they don't support the existing cabling or wiring or the existing antennas. So there's a lot of work that has to be done on doing that. But that again is just an estimate based on our current replacement. You could do the hybrid and you could be more aggressive on it, and you could actually meet the phased approach. It would just be more cost and more proactively replacing them in vehicles.
Chief Garcia.
Yes, sir. Before we get too far off of that, I just don't want you to miss the impact that would have on our officers in the field to do that. We'd very much be a proponent of being able to adopt those cameras in the cars. We're going to lose considerable manpower at times of day that we do not have manpower to lose to bring them to the station and adopt those cameras. So while this is certainly probably the best IT approach, it is absolutely not the best operational approach for us.
You're talking the new is not the best operation approach, hybrid.
No, sir, the new would be for us operationally. And the hybrid approach, we'd have to bring officers to the station before and after a shift to dock these cameras. And that's time I don't have to bring them to the station.
Why would it require a body cam start to be concurrent in 923 instead of on that? If we looked at the new approach and we went to 323 on that calendar and the cars were 923, why is that not feasible as another alternative?
The reason why and what Chief Garcia is referring to is if we, on the hybrid approach, that is deploying docking stations in the briefing room and issuing the officers body cameras. The new approach is the docking stations being installed in vehicles. And that is the reason why it's taking longer is the logistics of taking, one group of patrol vehicles to the upfitter at a time. We can't take them all out of service. And then they would have to go in and retrofit the vehicles with body cameras and in-car video. So it's quicker to deploy just the body cameras than it is to employ the body cameras and the in-car video at the same time.
Fully understand. Got it. And Commissioner Music-elect has a question as well.
Yes, my question was not for the slides of that. It was actually a question back to the agencies that currently are using the system. And it just goes back to the policy of releasing footage. So if there is an incident of a police officer shooting or a critical incident, what is their current policy for releasing that video?
Well, for Cape Coral at this point in time, we get with the state attorney's office to determine if the video should be released. If they allow us to release it, we release it immediately, of course, with some redaction to make sure that only the parties involved would actually be released. The other issue is if it's a use of force issue where there was no actual deaths, we usually will release a video very quickly due to the fact that, again, we want to be as transparent as possible to make sure that we squash any types of issues that could erupt based on current events, unfortunately. So we want to make sure that's good or bad, we're going to release what we've done for the most part.
Thank you for hanging in there with us, Lieutenant Cole. I appreciate that very much because I didn't know you were still in the background, so that's great.
Yes, sir.
All right. Next slide, please, Mr. Steele.
Okay, so this is the total annual cost comparison for each of the different systems. And so if you look at it here, the existing is, like I said, the baseline. So this is what we're spending now on regularly every fiscal year. And you see as the costs start to go up as the increased cost is the transition to cloud storage for the in-car video. That's something that we're planning on. Like I said, the PMF is in process right now for that first batch of cloud storage to become available next fiscal year. The phased approach is to continue with that. And then as you see here, the FY24 would be the aggressive replacement of the existing in-car video. It would be replacing approximately 100 in-car video systems at that year. And then FY25, between these 2 years, the in-car video and the body camera, that's why the costs are so high, approximately $1.2 million that year alone in equipment. And then as you see, though, it drops down here as it starts to normalize. One thing I will say to this, and we look at a phased approach, or even when we get to the new approach here, that's not a one-time peak, is that you will see that every 5 years as we're, versus the 20, replacing 20 every single year. That's consistent every year, and it helps us do that. If we do a peak aggressive replacement here, it's not only going to peak this year, and 5 years from there, or 7 years as we go out, you'll see that peak again and again through the life cycle as those devices come into replacement. And then if you look at the hybrid, there's a little bit more cost up here up front in the first year, $800,000. That would be everything needed for the in-car, the body camera, all the cloud storage for the body camera. And then you see it drops down a little bit because that year we won't be buying equipment in 23 because we just bought all the body camera. But then the costs start to kind of creep back up here as we do the replacement of the in-car video over that time. And the final one, it's close to $1.8 million if we did all new in the first year. That's all the body camera equipment, all the in-car video equipment, and then the cost drops back down more in line. And then this is just the cloud storage cost as we go forward. And again, you'll see that peak again as that stuff comes up for replacement. Yes, sir. I know there's lots of questions. I'm going to add one more thing before. This is total cost and includes all the storage costs, all the equipment costs, installation costs, shipping costs, training, additional staffing, additional IT infrastructure. So it's not just the body cameras or in-car video. So go ahead.
Does it also include an additional records person?
It includes 2 positions.
Yeah, our public records request staff person.
Yeah, there are 2 positions included in there, and one of them is a records person. The other one is more of a technology person to manage the infrastructure and impact this organization.
Mr. Walker.
I think Commissioner McCauley had a hand up first. So Commissioner McCauley, I'm going to bow to you, and I'm going to come back.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Commissioner Walker and Mayor. And I think, Mr. Steele, I think you answered my question, because when the chief said earlier about the hybrid approach being, take more manpower and everything, thank you for including all of that and making that clarify and comment when I first raised my hand, because that was going to be my question, is that it's all, what we're looking at right now is all inclusive, correct?
It is, but to also clarify, and Chief Garcia can comment on this as well, is this does not include like impact to officers or operational efficiencies or other things in terms of the sworn or the officer. This is just public records requests and technology impacts. That makes sense.
Thank you for that clarification too, because I think if, I was hearing the chief correctly, some of these options are going to be, as far as the manpower goes, are going to be a little more cost prohibitive than others. So that, I think, is an important piece of the dialogue. And Chief, thank you for bringing that to our attention and keeping that at the forefront as well, that it's a little bit more than what we're seeing right here, or a lot more, probably, when you look at the aggregate out the hours of officers it'll take to implement the process.
Is that an accurate statement, Mr. Steele?
Yes. I mean, when I'm looking at this from a project management perspective, obviously I'm working with the police department, its leadership, and its staff to implement a system that is optimal for them. That's something that we take. We're very customer service focused, and we want to make sure that what we're implementing is not just the right technology solution, but it's also what works for the officers and the command staff. One of the big things, I know some questions were asked about timing on here. Keep in mind, one of the reasons why it did include the CAD and RMS project and the integration with CAD and RMS project is the importance for tagging videos. That takes a lot of time. If you look at officers having to spend the time tagging, putting case numbers, and identifying all their videos, if we wait until after the CAD and RMS project's done and we integrate our in-car video and body camera system to the CAD and RMS system, it will save the officers a great deal of time from having to tag their videos. What that doesn't address, which is what Chief Garcia brought up, was the requirement for them to dock the videos for due video upload. If we have the in-car video system and the body cameras at the same, I will say, version of hardware, and then they can use the in-car video system to transfer the body camera system up, which eliminates the need for a dock in the station. So that is going to be a growing pain and something that we need to work with the police department on how they want to handle that. So.
Before Commissioner Walker, you go, can Chief Garcia make one comment, because I think he'd like to input it here, if that's possible. Chief Garcia.
Thank you, sir. Just to clarify, it's not that 30 minutes or an hour in the day, it's the time of day that's going to occur. If we have to bring them to the station to dock them, that'd be at the end of their shift or beginning of their shift, where we historically hold calls for service, and that's our least ability to provide service during those times, just because we run a lean shift. We could add more officers and that impact wouldn't be felt. But as we currently deploy now, that is where we're stretched the most thin, is when will be the critical time to dock these cameras. So that's the concern. It's not finding 30 minutes in the day to do it. It's when that 30 minutes would occur.
Understood completely. Commissioner Walker.
Just again, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Piggyback on what I think Commissioner McCauley was bringing forth as she did, and hearing again Commissioner from Chief Garcia, as we're looking at both hybrid and new, the personnel that will be affected and the service that would probably have to be taken into consideration for our community to do the hybrid approach would be something that you would not want to have to incur, if I heard you correct, Chief, as opposed to going all in and being able to do it on the new versus the hybrid. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Operationally wise, that would be the better for us to be able to dock the cameras in the car, so we don't lose that time of bringing officers to the station. And in respect to what Robert was saying, to be able to tag these videos and log them into the report writer system as well. All that comes with a cost. The more admin time we have, the less patrol time we have. So And we certainly are always looking to keep more patrol in the field than we are at the station.
Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure I heard. And I think Commissioner McCauley was trying to allude to that as well. Service, you're losing service in the field, you're losing, officers that are on patrol. It's certainly what we don't want to happen, because you definitely know when that hiccup may comes, and you may be involved in a situation that will cause some challenges for us here in our community. So
Yes.
that's where I wanted to make sure I was, even though I might be leaning towards somewhat of a hybrid approach. When I heard that, I thought, oh, stop. Let me see what's happening here, as opposed to the kind of service and the communities would want and would expect from law enforcement.
Yes, sir.
And
Thank you.
both the CAD, both the hybrid and new follow the CAD and RMS integrations, correct? We're up to speed in this chart with that being in place first.
Yes, with the funding for this graph, I want to be clear on here. This is the funding for it, and to kind of go back, the go live, I think, is the really one that we look at. And when I'm saying that, so for example, a hybrid here is go live 3/30 of 23. That's the CAD and RMS would be live a year from now, and then we would do the integration, and we would do the build and design and configuration, and all that would be done in advance on all of these options. So they're all would be integrated with CAD and RMS.
And they'll be tagged when they get in.
Yes, if we wanted to make these timelines more aggressive, that's when we would start to, I want to say, interfering or overlapping with the CAD and RMS project, where we're potentially going live sooner with in-car video or new in-car video or new body-worn cameras that wouldn't be integrated. So all these timelines are based off of beginning the projects after the CAD and RMS project is complete.
Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Robert. At this point, we don't have specific price quotes from any vendors, do we?
I do have price quotes from our existing vendor, and I have the price quotes that were provided us from vendors such as Axon and some other competitive. All the price quotes we have are in alignment. The main vendors, I would say there's probably 4 or 5 main in-car video and body camera vendors, and I've been here for 4 years, and every year for the last 4 years, I've kept my finger on the pulse of industry pricing and estimates on there, and I get renewed quotes, budgetary quotes for situations like this. So I have a pretty good idea of what the prices are. We have not entered into like an RFP or negotiations or competitive pricing with anybody, but we do have pricing from several major vendors, including Axon, and we know what those prices are and what the technology and other indirect impacts of those solutions are.
Thank you. Yeah, and I just wonder if we got to that phase of having specific requests for quotes, if there would be any variation in the fiscal impact year over year, if these companies are, if the spend in year one is what we see on the chart, or if there are deals that are structured that spread those costs out. And you may know that today. It's just something that I think would be important for us to consider, in the decision.
I think a lot of the costs, the impact on the cost, again, the year after year ongoing costs are the storage costs for that. And unfortunately, all these vendors use AWS or Azure for cloud storage, and they're passing on those costs. And so there is not a huge significant savings in storage costs, because they're, I don't want to say they don't have much control over that. They're reselling that. They're not their personal storage. So whatever they negotiate with Amazon or whoever they're storing with, they're passing those charges on to their customers. So,
it's almost a commodity pricing, you know, as you would go into the arena. And we would fund, you know, frankly, if you look at this assume that you would move forward, we would move forward on this, and we were looking at the $1.8 million, probably, yeah, I mean, if the American Recovery Plan could fund that, that'd be nirvana, you know, and don't know about that, and we'd love that. Or you do a 1-year millage increase for funding that project, so that at least, you know, you would have it budgeted as a capacity, and then anything that's better on the RFP or any cost controls that can take place along the way, you know, just doesn't have to be spent. All right, other comment? Yes, Commissioner Walker, and then Mr. Steele.
Yeah, and in lieu of what you're saying, in addition to what you're saying, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Steele, because I've heard from both other communities, municipalities. Yeah, you're right, Mr. Mayor. If we could use some American Rescue dollars to help support some of this, it would be great, very much so. But did we hear? Did I hear correct from both those particular municipal governments, agencies, that there was, and I think I heard even early on in our first conversation, possibility of having some federal grant dollars available or not?
Yes, there have been some in the past, and of course, it would be when I was making that statement, it would assume that. So whatever we would do, and whatever combination of what we could get grants or out of the ARP would be wonderful. To the extent we could do that and make that cost neutral, it won't be in terms of storage on a long-term basis. It isn't in terms of the cost to have to replace on a long-term basis, but it would allow us to get started as fully funded as possible.
Just want to make sure I heard it correct. Thank you.
City Manager Strauss.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Absolutely, sir. Yes.
Okay, great. I think to that question, and it was something I was going to follow up on as well. I thought I heard one of the presenters talk about some federal confiscation funds, and so I'm not sure, and it's something I can follow up with Chief on, and with the financing at LPD, but. That may be an opportunity as well. As I think I heard one of the presenters mention that. So I don't know if we already have, things that are encumbered with those types of funds, or if we have those, funds currently budgeted. But that there may be a combination of things here that we could utilize. But the point that's being made is, I think, very important is, maybe even more important than the initial investment is going to be, the continued O&M moving beyond just the initial implementation. But we can certainly research that if I heard that correctly, about some type of federal confiscation of funding options.
Yes, that was the chief that said that. I'm glad you shared that, because that's where my direction was going. Because I thought the chief from Kissimmee did say that, Chief Odell, if it was his name.
All right, Mr. Steele, what's next?
So this is the total cost, cumulative cost comparison. This is actually, so for fiscal year 22, these are the costs for 22, and then 23, it's 22 plus 23, 24, it just compounds. So if you look at the end here, this just kind of show you the total cost over a 5-year period, where the new is just under 4.5 million. The hybrid is just over 3.5 million. So it kind of just shows you here, and you can keep in mind that all these are sliding, and we can adjust, like on the phased approach, if you adjust the phase, this jump that happens from year to year, just if you do it earlier, that jump occurs earlier, you move it later. So it just kind of shows that. And again, the total cost over the 5-year period. I think this kind of speaks to what we're talking about, reoccurring costs. And the annual storage costs are major. The estimated 342,900 is what I have right now. If we do kind of an a la carte storage, which is you buy as where you go, you kind of think of like your cell phone plan where you pay for the data you use, and it's up to $485,280. That's for unlimited storage. So that's kind of the, I want to say min max. And again, you know, maybe we might be able to save some money with some competitive pricing on that, but that is whichever option you use for doing an implementation of in-car video after that initial 5-year term, that's what you can expect to have for your ongoing operating just for storage. The other one, all these costs are based on the factors such as the video quality, retention period, number of devices, configuration, and department policy. Decisions can change the storage costs. They can change the number of officers. We had the conversation. Are you rolling it out to? We have 200 body cameras on here. Whether you're having detectives wearing them, whether we're having SROs, lieutenants. The number of officers is going to impact the pricing, but we feel these are pretty accurate numbers, and that but it just kind of wanted to make everybody know as we kind of go forward through the process, do implementation and do final calculations, they could fluctuate slightly based on those factors. Indirect costs, I mentioned the additional staff, dedicated internet service, wireless access points. They're impacted by the scope and the timeline estimates that I showed before. So for example, when you talk about like all new, you'd have to hire the staff and get all that infrastructure in place year one and all the cloud storage year one, where as a phased approach or some of the other options, some of those indirect costs aren't realized until the second or third year down the road as we move forward with doing the implementation. Just kind of wrapping it up, I've got 2 slides left, just kind of summary and the direction for commission. I don't know, Chief, if you guys want to take over, but I can just kind of go through these last 2 slides. Just the direction, are we getting body cameras? Are we continuing with in-car video only? The time frame, each of these options goes any time frame from 2 years to 5 years, and the cost estimates are from 1 to 5 million total cost over 5 years. And then just the next steps would be finalizing a proposal based on the direction and submitting a PMF to move forward. And then I'll leave it this is just the final summary slide that kind of shows everything, cost, scope, and timeline of each of the 3 options.
Excellent. Comments, questions? I don't want to be shy. Okay, there's Commissioner Walker. I'll wait till last.
Well, I know, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know as I had thought about moving toward the BWC body-worn cameras and looking at, some cost analysis as I thought earlier on, I was pretty much at the point of having. I said, okay, let's look at this thing and see where we can be at, and was checking out, I guess, what I thought would land pretty much in a situation where we're being asked by a couple of our groups, I guess, concerned citizen groups, as you would call them in our community here. The hybrid approach is where I was, I approached this particular subject matter about. But then when I started hearing the concern there from Chief about if you utilize a hybrid approach and the challenge it may be with having to bring personnel out of the field and having to deal with that kind of situation where you may have patrol questioned or being questionable in our community. I thought, oh, stop, wait, I don't want that to happen either, because you never know what may occur. So I'm kind of in between both still with a new and hybrid. And I was thinking, wait, if we could go with an aggressive kind of a way with a hybrid, could we still use that scenario with a hybrid with some aggressive in-car video upgrade that would help support, the hybrid approach, as I heard or listened to Mr. Steele. So I'm kind of wrestling there with that situation still, and I'd like to maybe hear more from my colleagues to let you know where I am, so we can I think move forward as we would want to be for the BWC's body-worn cameras.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Commissioner Walker. Would the next step in the process, if we decided to go in the direction of implementing cameras, would that be to go out and issue a request for quotes?
Yes. Well,
yes.
I mean,
here, and I'll share with you, I'm a little leery to get into the weeds of trying to pick hybrid versus new, and this is not we lean on your expertise, I think, as we've said, and I think that may be a little premature at this point. So I wonder, Mayor, is this something we need to put on the agenda for a Monday meeting just to be able to discuss with the full commission? And I'm guessing we don't have to take an official vote, but we do need to, and correct me if I'm wrong, but as a body, give direction, come to a consensus, give direction to the police department. So I just wonder, does that need to happen on Monday? Continue the conversation.
So the process is that, first of all, we're looking at costs assumptively here. We haven't talked about whether or not we want to do this program in the first place, which we would go back and do. So all we're looking at is kind of how we would direct this going forward. And yes, it would be our first June commission meeting at the earliest that we would have this prepared. I mean, we're not going to do it for this Monday's meeting, obviously, that we did have this prepared. But I think the direction that they would like to have from us is kind of what can they discuss and make decisions between, which may be this hybrid and new, and then to make a formal recommendation that would be prior to that meeting. When I listen to Chief Garcia and I think about the problems between shifts and the lack of coordination that takes place, and then something isn't working well, and instead of having this be a much more congruent system, personally, I would love to see, if we were doing body cameras, I would love to see them deployed by spring of 23, but for 3 more months or so, to be able to have a total system in place that allows it to be done right while we maximize customer service to our citizens and the amount of quality of protection that they receive, and we don't complicate it, which is what we're not trying to do. I was also, like Commissioner Walker, thinking more like in terms of the hybrid, but I think that whole deployment issue and the timing and getting the integration done and having it be within the vehicle so that they could all be downloaded when they come back in off the shift has a great deal of value and keeps us from tripping over ourselves. So I guess formally to your question, Commissioner McLeod, is we'd want the chief and staff to weigh in and say, yes, really, this is our preference at first, and then go to your point, gather some of that global information, which really in this presentation exists. And I'm very, very grateful that we even have this 5-year cost estimate, because we can look between the 3.6 and the 4.4 and say, is that spread warranted for protecting, in over 5 years, by the way, which is heavily front-end loaded, for protecting our quality of service, and then make that recommendation, because to do this, we need to, and then that RFPs would follow, and then we'd come in to some specific costs. It takes time to get this all done. And so a June-ish, let's just say, maybe it isn't ready by the first commission meeting, maybe it's the second commission meeting, but a June-ish direction and cost projection helps us then move into budget for our July or August talks in terms of what that budget recommendation is going to look like, and then to also have known what our funding capacity can be by then, as we would talk about that, so that we are realistic with respect to whether or not we would need to consider a millage differential increase for the early front-end loading. So that's a long answer, and I hope it combined elements of what you were intending, and if I missed something, let me know.
It was great. I think that's what I'm, the way I understand it, we don't have to make a specific policy recommendation right here in this workshop, that we can move some of this till June, but share where we are on it. I think, you know, as you mentioned, the funding component, that's a big part that we will have to consider. And so I know we don't know all the variables there yet, but I would say to our finance staff to be, I'll be coming just one-on-one to look at some options. You know, when we talk about small millage increase, for me, I would have to know that we have left no stone unturned on the expense side before we're going to go to the well of the millage increase. So that's, and maybe we don't even have to, as you mentioned, if there's some other funding or American Rescue Plans, that may just be something that, you know, we're talking about for discussion purposes. But yes, so having said that, you answered my questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Walker.
So are you asking that at this point, as I saw at the end of the presentation, you want to have us, who's still on the call, because I know we have one person, I think, out right now, and I know Commissioner-elect Music is not visible, but he's hearing it. So he is listening. You want to give direction as we should, and to say, yes, let's move forward. Let's look at, you're still moving forward with what we want to do for EWD, and bring back, you know, some kind of, as I said just now, between hybrid and new. Tell me if we can still go with hybrid, but maybe to make some change in the in-car video aggressive movement there to support, you know, the cost that may be a little bit more on the hybrid approach, to give us what I think we want to have, so we won't be coming out of the gate with a total $4.4 million kind of total package. That's just where I was. So that's why I brought that kind of scenario up.
So I think it would be good for us to weigh into that regard. If we are proponents of the forward direction to a body camera system, and subject to the way that we would actually have that resolution written, and that would become formalized for a vote in a commission meeting with discussion, and the funding of that would be integrated as well as we would go forward. So the thing I think would be important to know is, do we have at least 4 commissioners that believe this is the right course for us to continue down the road to pursue? And if so, then we authorize this to move forward. Commissioner Madden.
Thank you, Mayor. Now I'm feeling like I should have asked this when we had the other gentleman here from the other agencies, but certainly, you know, it would have been good to ask them how they did pay for their body cameras. And I'm also curious if the other agencies went towards a, you know, vote from the populace, a referendum, you know, to see the civic desire. You know, did they do a lot of, you know, reaching out to the citizens for this, or was it just a council initiative? You know, I feel remiss that I did not ask how they initiated it, paid for it, and if they did, if it was just the council leadership or if it was a citizen vote.
I'm looking to see if there was going to be a light up of any of them, if they were still on, but I don't see them on.
Mayor, they both had to leave, but I can follow up with them if you guys would like those questions answered and get it to you.
Sure. That would be great if you could. So my question to the commissioners is, do you think we should continue this effort to move forward with considering direction towards a resolution that would consider these elements and the body camera implementation, and a cost recommendation effort by the Lakeland Police Department in the process? And if so, let's do a thumbs up on that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And Mike, I don't know your thumbs up. Can you weigh in and tell us yes or no?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, so that's 6 up. So Commissioner Walker.
I think too, we in doing what we as we move forward, you know, one of the two things that we did hear from both those municipalities, Kissimmee and Cape Coral, they did it without any citizenry kind of approach. If I'm mistaken, please correct me. But you know, we've been approached. We've been approached by 2 different kinds of groups in our community, and that's why I asked them about their demographics, because I know, you know, knowing those cities and being familiar with somewhat of those cities, we have a much different kind of breakdown when it comes to their demographics than ours. So that's why I asked that question even early on. But I think, again, it's important to know that where they went forward with it without any citizenry or any group approaching them, we're different somewhat because we've been approached. So I think that's going to be some, I think that's something we need to be, consideration to be given as well.
Thank you, sir. Well, I think this is, as you can see, this has certainly been very, very helpful for our insights. And City Manager Strauss has a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's good to hear the conversations of the commission, and let me also point out when we come to discussions, even about is it policy or operations, should it go to a referendum or be direction from the commission? I think if we wanted to make this probably a more expedited process, I mean, I would say that Chief Garcia and I, from an operational standpoint, have the ability to implement this type of technology. No different than, we make decisions and purchase weapons and body armor and the like. The key question though is the commission certainly does have approval of the budget. And so I think at this point, what we're mostly looking for is just that. We need to determine what the funding needs are going to be based on kind of the direction that the commission is telling us to go, so that we can start building how we're going to fund this. And certainly, we do anticipate some of that will need to be a part of our upcoming budget process. So, if that helps in with that perspective, I do think Chief would agree that we can do it operationally, just like I mentioned some of the other equipment that we implement at the police department. We just need to kind of work on what are the options for funding, and as part of the upcoming budget presentations where we may not have the ability through some of the recovery act, or I'm interested to see where we're at on the confiscated federal funds. The rest will fall into the budget, and so we could bake that in and present that as part of the budget process.
Would you like to have us weigh in as a majority on hybrid or new?
I mean, that would be helpful, because as how we're going to afford this or fund it, there's certainly a difference in the cost of going either way. And then Chief, do you have, as far as those two, which seems to be where the commission's at, do you have any other comments on that?
No, sir. The only comment I would have is, certainly if we were to go down that hybrid road, we want to at least be up to full strength. As you know, our patrol squads are not at full strength now as we continue to replenish some of the other officers we lost. So we're already working at a deficit. And as I said, these transitions would occur at peak times when, we're already stretched. So those are concerns for us. We've talked about some other strategies where we might be able to, use our brothers and sisters over at the firehouse to use their facilities to trade these cameras in and out. So we're not through exploring that yet. There's other options we might could find, but that all comes with a cost. And the only other thing I would add is the timeline that Mr. Steele presented to you today was based on having those funds July of 21 to begin. So if any of these funds were to be gathered in the coming budget, that would certainly change that timeline for those months as well. So not to leave you with dates that are in concrete, these were references. And that would be the only other things I would add.
Well, my recommendation on the funding would be that if that's the case and we've decided to move forward, those could be funds that are just allocated in advance, but still charged the following fiscal year. There's ways to accomplish that. I think if we want to move forward on this, starting July is the most important thing we do, is get the clock going and start to move that direction. So Commissioner Madden.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to also just throw in if our city manager is going to be looking at grant opportunities, we know that the federal administration has lofty climate goals, and with electrification of fleets being kind of a popular thing, I don't know if there are grants for doing something like that. When I think about going to new versus hybrid, I heard what our chief said about uploading older vehicles with new equipment, and that just seems to be a big ordeal. And then just what's the life cycle of that vehicle, and then you're going to change out the new vehicle anyway. So I would be curious to see if there were kind of a number of things that we could put together in a package, and think about with regard to our vehicles as well. If there's some great opportunity with someone who's wanting to, with grants and with, companies to do some kind of fleet electrification, I think that we should look into any and all methods of getting grant money if we're going to go forward.
All that being said, I think we ought to weigh in on between new and hybrid in terms of direction. And in my mind, hybrid is a not to exceed number. New is a not to exceed number. There might be some accomplishments that are underneath this that take place, but it certainly empowers them to know the aggressiveness. Technology increases transparency, increases accountability. It is absolutely the direction that it would appear forces are going to, and our police need support. And it helps to provide protection for our citizens, and it helps to provide protections for officers. And it is what it is as a result. So I would personally advocate that we consider the community quality of protection in this to advocate the most protective tools that we can have in place, while also the citizen quality of implementation timing that takes place by not hamstringing our shift changes, which is a time when we're instructing what happened last night and went forward and what needs to go forward and all the things related there too. So my request would be that we take a thumbs up on either new or hybrid. And if you would agree, I just need a commissioner to weigh in on that.
Thank you, Mayor. And Chief, just to bring it back and clarify, if you had the ideal scenario of implementation, it would be the new one, correct?
Yes, sir. Just from a customer service standpoint and an operational deployment standpoint, of keeping our folks in the field.
Just make sure I had that right, because I was going to follow that with, I will follow the lead and support you and your leadership team when it comes to implementation. And so I just want to make sure I understood where you were on it. But so Mayor, I would concur if we're going to go that route. I would support going to the next step. And I think getting those cost pictures specifically and then funding options is going to be paramount for us. Sean, thank you for stepping in and showing us where there's an area where things can be operational, because I know sometimes it's just hard to keep that straight. So I appreciate that.
And Commissioner Walker.
Yes, sir. And even though I as I've said more than a couple of times, well, I think I was leaning toward maybe a hybrid approach, but when I heard what the chief has shared about the challenges that would be faced with our community being having patrol, options or challenges even in that regard, I would have to, as you just said, Commissioner McLeod, buy out and say, hey, I don't want that to be a case that we have to be faced with at all. So, and that would bring challenges to him and his department. And if you're going toward saying that the approach should be the new way, the new approach, I would have to go that way as well.
All right, given that conversation, not seeing any other hands up in the air, if you're in favor of the new pursuit, thumbs up. 1, 2, 3, 4. And Commissioner Music?
Yes, I would be in favor of the new, but can I ask a question real quick? Are we talking about just moving this conversation forward?
Yes, sir.
Okay, then yes, I would be in favor of that. Thank you.
All right, that's unanimous of the present commissioners. So I think you have a good direction, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and commissioners, for all of the discussion, and we'll continue to work toward this effort, and we'll come back with what those funding options are, and again with the expectation that certainly that'll be part of the upcoming budget workshop that we have, and then the formal budget process.
And before we leave, I want to thank you for great preparation for this workshop, because it was extremely helpful to us. And also, Mr. Steele, you're in the background all the time for the integrations that are taking place and the work that's being done in a pivotally important area and arena that most citizens don't realize even occurs. And thank you for that leadership. We appreciate it, sir. Commissioner Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before we get off the call here, I want to just share with my colleagues and tell a story that real quick. As last night was the first Ridge Legal Cities dinner in over a year. The last one was March of last year. The mayor, myself, and his daughter Emma was there to represent Lakeland, of course. I know there was other things that made city manager who's normally in attendance had to be somewhere else, and I'm in hopes of, as I again have shared with you before, having several of you others, my colleagues, be involved. I want to thank Commissioner McLeod for his coming on to the Legal Cities, one of the legislative policy committees. Thank you for that, Commissioner McLeod. And I know Commissioner McCauley says she will start looking at some things maybe. So hopefully we'll have more participation from our Lakeland group, because as I move into my presidency, I'd like to have Lakeland represented there when I can say, hey, I got my colleagues here too, you all, helping out with this particular venture. But certainly want to say that I really appreciate that, and know that we're hosting next month. So, and they're looking forward to coming to Lakeland. I know you all know when we host, we get a goodly number, I should say, of participation from around the Ridge League, the city's area. So if they had over 200 last night, I know we'll have more than 200 plus on next month at our meeting as well. So thank you again, please.
And that'll be at the RP Funding Center, June 15th, Tuesday night. So it's on your calendar. But thank you for your leadership, Commissioner Walker, and Florida League of Cities, by the way. Keith, if there's nothing else, then I think we could adjourn. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you for this workshop.
Yes, sir.